Welcome to On Doers. For this episode, we talked with serial startup founder David Cummings 1 week after he sold his company Pardot for $100 million to ExactTarget. We sat down at Dancing Goat's Coffee Bar in Atlanta.
So, and I ask everyone this question: do you think entrepreneurs are born, or do you think you can, over time, over your circumstances, you kind of become one? Like in your situation, do you look back when you were a little kid and you were doing a lot of entrepreneurial stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my take is 70% born, 70% nature, 30% nurture.
Right. Interesting.
So I think there's got to be some spark. There's got to be something there. And then depending on your circumstances and surrounding, that spark either gets nurtured, and it gets over the top and you actually make the jump, or it doesn't get nurtured and just nothing ever happens.
Yeah. So when you grew up, did you start things? I mean, were you doing different things, or?
I was doing different things as far back as I can remember. Yeah.
Any in particular that?
The most practical one, the most legitimate one, in 8th grade, I was on a traveling baseball team, like a little all-star team type thing, and a buddy of mine on the team was really into computers as I was, and he gave me a book, Teach Yourself C in 21 Days. And so I'd always been around computers, but I hadn't, and I love video games, King's Quest, Space Quest, Quest for Glory, all the kinds of...
Anything with Quest in it.
Yeah, all kinds of quests. And so I'd always loved the computers and playing the games, more so than like the Nintendo games, even though I had a lot of fun with those.
Right.
And so a buddy of mine in 8th grade gave me a book, Teach Yourself C in 21 Days. And so I read that book, and I was in geometry at the time, so I started writing some C code basically to prove that my math homework had the right answers.
Right.
And so I just got hooked on actually going from playing on the computers to making the computers do whatever I wanted them to do.
Right.
And so then in 9th grade, I had an earth space science class, and one of our vocabulary words was MassCon. And MassCon is an abbreviation for mass concentration, which is an area of higher gravity on the moon. And so for whatever reason, I got excited about that word. And so the name of my first company that I started in 9th grade in high school was called MassCon Enterprises.
No way.
And so MassCon Enterprises made a Windows 3.11 application called StatBook, designed for baseball and softball coaches to keep track of all their stats.
That is awesome.
So you can think of it as like an Excel spreadsheet, but specific to baseball and all kinds of stuff that a normal web app.
You said this was 9th grade?
It was 9th grade.
Okay.
And so I went from StatBook as my first product, put it on Prodigy, CompuWare, and AOL to sell as shareware. And then before my 16th birthday, so when I was 15, so I was in 10th grade, I got a check in the mail from a random guy in Iowa that paid the $12.95, put a check in the mail blindly to Tallahassee, and I just emailed him back up a serial code to unlock it. Basically, it was NAGware.
How do you know about it?
He downloaded it off of CompuServe. CompuServe was my main outlet.
Your distribution.
My distribution.
Okay.
And then I went from StatBook to what I called the On Startup series. And so the On Startup series was things like a vocabulary word of the day, a famous quote of the day, an SAT word of the day, a Spanish word of the day, a French word of the day. And so you imagine those little flip books that you have on your desk. I wanted to make a digital version of those flip books.
Right.
So that was the On Startup series. Made a core platform and then plugged in different types of content. It was just a Windows app that every time you rebooted Windows, because back in the day, you'd go to bed or you'd go home and you'd turn your machine off and then you come in and you turn it on and wait for it to boot up.
Right.
And so it was On Startup.
That's awesome.
People all over the world just started sending checks in for $14.95.
And same thing with the distribution? I mean,
Same thing with the distribution, the shareware on those different sites.
Yeah, and it was just you, no one
else.
Just
me, And so I didn't make a ton of money, but $1,000 when you're in high school, doing something on your own is a great feeling.
Yeah, interesting.
And then that segued into website development. So internet took off.
Right.
This is like 97, 98 by now.
Right.
Built a bunch of websites for people. And then that led into the idea for Hand and Hill, which is content management.
Would you say you were just on, when you're talking about website stuff, would you say you were amateur, pretty good? Not, I mean, as far as like coding and developing, did you get decent?
It's all self-taught. I would say I was decent. I was good at getting things done. It might not have been the most elegant code,
but it was enough
I could accomplish whatever I needed to get done.
Yeah. So not much was elegant in 97 anyway.
Yeah, it was a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, okay.
And then when I got to Duke, my roommate freshman year was way more technical than I was. He went to the North Carolina School of Science and Math, and he was already running Linux servers in his dorm room in 1998.
That's crazy.
And so he was telling me about this thing called PHP, and MySQL. So in 98 in my dorm room, we started building basically a site for, we called it textbooks.ml.org, but it's basically a textbook exchange for Duke students. So instead of going and selling it to selling it back to the campus bookstore, people could go on and say, here's the books I have, here's the ones I want. And it was just a MySQL database.
This was like Chegg before its time?
Well, it was more of an exchange. It wasn't even a rental.
Okay.
It was like, hey, I have this, Calc 3 book. Does anybody want it?
Right.
And obviously it was much cheaper to buy it directly than it was to go through the bookstore.
Right.
And better margin to resell it back.
Yeah.
And so then that segued into Hannon Hill, which is content management software, originally for small businesses, then it went into universities.
And this is what, like freshman, sophomore year?
Yeah, so Hannon Hill I started my junior year.
Okay. What's Hannon Hill? What's the name?
Hannon Hill is the name of the street that my family lives on in Tallahassee, Florida.
No way. Okay.
So they live on South Hannon Hill Drive in the Buckhead neighborhood.
No way.
Of Tallahassee.
Really?
But Buckhead in Tallahassee is like 100 homes and that's it.
That's small.
It's like a tiny subdivision.
Yeah. That's a cool name about the neighborhood. Okay.
And so when I started the company in December of 2000, Hannon Hill, I wanted a name that didn't sound like a .com because the .com crash had already occurred. There was a hangover for sure with those types of names.
Right.
So Hannon Hill has the alliteration, sort of sounds like a publishing company or like
totally does, yeah.
Or like a financial services, something that sounds more conservative.
Yeah.
So Hannon Hill is the name of the first company. And so after I graduated from Duke, moved down to Atlanta with myself, and then a buddy of mine that went to Emory was here. And then I hired a Georgia Tech guy that was awesome. And we started building the company in 2007. We were Inc. 500, number 247.
So, but there were some years that were a little lean there, right? Like,
very lean.
When you first said I'm focusing full time on it, was when you graduated from Duke?
I took a leave of absence from college.
Okay.
So I dropped out.
Okay.
And I worked on it full time.
No story is a success without that.
Yeah.
So did you ever finish or no?
So the semester that I took a leave of absence from Duke was the semester that September 11th happened, 2001.
Right.
And so after that, all IT buying dried up.
Yeah.
There was no money to be raised. I went around, tried to raise money. Nobody wanted to invest in a dropout undergrad at that time.
Okay. So then you moved down to Atlanta saying, why Atlanta?
So growing up in Tallahassee, Atlanta was always the big city we would go to.
Okay.
So Tallahassee is 2.5 hours from Jacksonville, 4 hours from Tampa, Orlando, and then 4 hours from Atlanta.
Right.
But Atlanta is bigger than all those cities combined. And so Atlanta, we'd come here for Six Flags or a Braves game. We'd even drive up here to get cheap flights out of the airport.
Right.
Because Tallahassee is such a small town that the airport's really expensive because they have basically an oligopoly with the carriers that serve out of there.
Right.
So an awesome town, but I wanted a big city to grow a business.
Gotcha.
And so because Georgia Tech's here, it's an amazing place to build a technology company.
Right.
All the young professionals, low cost of living, tons of technical talent here. I mean, it really is the best place in the whole country to be a scrappy technology entrepreneur.
Right.
Scrappy defined as either bootstrapping it or capital light.
Interesting. That was a pretty advanced thinking at that time.
It was luck. It was a whole lot of luck.
Yeah.
In retrospect, it was a great move.
Right. Okay. So then you're in Atlanta. You're just focusing full time on Hannon Hill, and what's the progression of kind of Hannon Hill from that point?
So this would be August of 2002. A buddy of mine that went to Emory was already in Atlanta, and so hired him full time, and then went on Craigslist and found an awesome guy, Georgia Tech grad, that became our lead developer, and started working on the next generation product. Launched that product on April 15th, 2003.
Okay.
Sold our first customer of that by the end of 2003. So it's still really slow going.
Yeah.
Really slow going.
And it's all self-funded, bootstrapped at this point.
So I built another product called Super Update that was PHP MySQL, the original product for Hannon Hill, still a content management system. And we went to a trade show in New York, and there was a company based out of Texas that wanted to license it. So we licensed the product to them, got some money up front for prepaid royalties, and then used that money to build the second product, which was ultimately very successful.
Okay. So you guys, this is lean before lean was like
This
a
is
thing.
very lean, yeah.
Okay.
So launched the new product April of 03, sold a copy of it to a company based in Enid, Oklahoma at the end of the year. And then the next year sold it to a half dozen companies, 2 of which were universities, found via Google AdWords. So pay-per-click advertising. We generated a bunch of leads. 2 of the customers that we signed happened to be universities. And so now we're talking 04. And at the end of 04, we're like, okay, we're going to focus on universities because 2 of our 6 customers were colleges.
Right.
So went to Barnes & Noble, got one of the giant books that has every college and university in the United States.
Yep.
There was approximately 4,160 2-year, 4-year public-private schools. Tore the book in half, hired 2 Emory undergrads as interns for $10 an hour, gave them the books, and literally they cold called every single one of those. They would cold call them just to try to get a demo. Once they would get a demo set up, I would do the demo. So I would act as the sales engineer, I would act as the product manager, and then the CEO.
Right.
And so these Emory interns essentially would nurture the relationship. And so we got some good initial progress there, and then hired a few full-time salespeople, and then just continued to pound the phones. And even to this day, the year 2012, the Hannon Hill sales team still has tons of cold calling into the head of IT, the head of campus communications, the CIO, the web committee, whatever the case is at lots of colleges and universities.
That's great. Not using the phone books anymore, I'm sure.
Not using the phone books.
That is all. You have those phone books?
I wish I did.
That's awesome.
But it's literally one of those giant books.
Yeah, and they're just, I remember.
Yeah,
and it has like a 1 page on each.
1 page, yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Hannon Hill, like at what point do you spin out Pardot from Hannon Hill, and how'd that whole thing come about?
Yeah, so Hannon Hill's an awesome business, still doing well today, has a great management team.
Were you phasing out kind of the leadership role in that company, or?
Yeah, in 2007, I started Pardot in March of 2007. And at that time, I realized that I wanted to get into a business that was all recurring revenue, or all, a different type of economic model.
Right.
So software as a service or something like that had a different type of revenue model than big upfront fees and then small maintenance and support contracts.
Right. Yeah. And the Pardot name has a good story behind it, right?
Yeah, so at the time, so it was December of 2006 that I started thinking around, hey, I want to do something different. I want to branch out, start a new business. And I knew it was going to be in this marketing lead gen. The whole marketing stuff that Hannon Hill did was successful, but it was really inefficient.
Yeah.
And I went on dictionary.com, typed in marketing, and at the time, 29 different translations appeared. And one of the translations was Pardot. And so I took the Pardot translation, or the word Pardot, went to register.com to see if the domain was available. And it was, so I paid $8. And the goal was to find a really short domain name.
6 letters, that's good.
6 letters that is easy to spell and pronounce.
Yep.
And then also is not previously registered, which is really hard to come by.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think most translations are just like, they're hard to pronounce or whatever. Pardot's about as easy to spell and pronounce.
Yeah, so it means to market or to sell in Latvian. The only trade-off with it, and it's a very minor one, is that if you do any sort of social media monitoring or internet monitoring, Pardot shows up all the time in Twitter for the Latvians talking about marketing and selling. So you have to filter by language, so you do the language.
So you think you're popular in other countries.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. That's awesome. Okay, so now did you immediately focus all of your time on Pardot?
Yeah, so started working on the idea for it December of 06, started full-time on it in March of 07. So that's when Adam and I started. So Adam started full-time the beginning of March of 07.
Okay, and then what was kind of the trajectory of Pardot?
So Pardot year 1, 2007, we did about $2,000 in revenue. Year 2, we went to about $400,000 in revenue.
Wow.
Year 3, we went to $1.2 million in revenue. Year 4, we went to $3.4 million in revenue. Year 5, we went to about $7 million in revenue. And half a year after that, we were bought by ExactTarget.
Right. So I want to back up just a little bit. Do you have a fundamental like disbelief in raising money, or is that just the way it kind of turned out?
That's the way it turned out.
Okay. So you wanted to, did you try to raise money?
We actively tried to raise money.
You did mention you did in Hand and Hill in the beginning. Pardot, did you?
Hand and Hill, we tried to raise money too.
Right.
Yeah.
But Pardot as well.
Pardot as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Went out and shook the tin can and pitched to 30, had conversations with 30 different venture funds and angel groups.
That's interesting. So, but now knowing what you know, do you think that actually had a positive impact? I mean, not being able to raise money, or do you think, it forces you to act differently in your business?
I think it was the best thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah.
That we failed at raising money. And like you said, it forced us to focus more on the customers and building the business.
Right. It's funny, a lot of people who don't end up raising money get credit for, he bootstrapped the whole thing, but a lot of those people tried to raise money, they just couldn't, and then they got to that point. It's interesting. So you guys were in control of your own destiny the whole way through.
We were.
One other thing that I think is interesting is you've started, like while you've been doing Hand and Hill and Pardot, you've started a bunch of different companies. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? I don't have time, I barely have enough time to run to just do one company, and how were you able to find the time to break off? And I know you're not necessarily the CEO of all those companies, but how do you do that?
So there's 3 other companies that I've been involved with to help start. One's called Clickscape, which does lead generation for first-time home buyers using a network of certified real estate agents. One's called Rigor. Rigor does web performance management software, basically figuring out how to make websites faster and better uptime. And then one's called SalesLoft, which mines the internet looking for compelling events that salespeople need to know about, so sales intelligence software.
Right.
So in each case, it was an entrepreneur that I had known, and the entrepreneur had really good domain expertise in something, whether it was software performance or real estate or sales and marketing. And so met up with an entrepreneur, they had domain expertise in an area, and from my own personal experiences, I had ideas. And so in each one I said, hey, here's an idea that matches up with your domain expertise as well as an area of interest of mine.
Right.
Let's talk about building a company together. And so in each case we got together and then just started working on it.
Right. I get the sense that you think about this 24 hours a day, like this is like your absolute passion, and so you're just always thinking about it. That's why you're always new ideas, even though your hands are full with what's right in front of you.
Yeah. I have the lucky intersection of, figure out what you're good at, figure out what you love, and then find the intersection of those 2 items.
Yeah.
And so for me, I love creating businesses, and I've done a decent job at it as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm lucky that both what I do for my day job as well as what I like as a hobby are the same thing.
Do you just like the creating part? And then at a certain point, it's like you like to go back to the creating part again, because at a certain point you're operating a company, and now the other things get into play. Now you have to manage, now you have to grow a team, now you have to grow a culture. What's your favorite part of that life cycle?
I like when things are in chaos and there's challenges and problems to be solved. And there can be chaos at 1 employee, or there could be chaos at 100 employees. Chaos in a good way, chaos in the sense of things that are rapidly changing and lots of stuff's going on and problems that need to be solved.
Right.
If things calm down and it's too steady state, it's too much cruise control, then it's not as challenging for me personally.
Right.
And so that's when I start looking for.
That's Pardot had to have gotten to that point, right? What's the total employee count, Pardot?
North of 110 employees.
So it had to have gotten to a point where it's stable, you got a nice office, and everyone, you have the right people doing their different things.
But the good news,
you get antsy there, like where you're like, this is fun, but I want chaos again.
The cool thing about Pardot is that it was growing so fast that even with 100 employees, there was lots of chaos and challenges and problems to be solved.
Right.
It wasn't problems like, hey, we need to keep the lights on with cash flow, but definitely challenges around, okay, we want to grow our sales team from 10 people to 30 people in 6 months.
Right.
That's a serious problem. How do we accomplish that?
Yeah.
And so very different types of problems than, hey, let's just figure out how to get a product that has some product market fit and customers will pay for it. So Pardot, because of its crazy growth rates, provided lots of opportunity for challenges.
Right.
Even at 110 employees.
So the blog, you got to tell me the story behind the blog. What, highly read blog in Atlanta especially, but probably within the Southeast or anyone that is going through the early challenges of a startup. How'd that come about? Why do you do it? I'm sure it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, I was like, hey, I want to start a blog. Blogging was hot. And I wrote a few blog posts. And my
Which,
goal,
by the way, everyone said that, right? And the fact that you're actually still doing this.
And so my goal at the time was one blog post a week. And I realized that I wasn't allocating the time, I wasn't getting it done. And so after a year or two of trying to do one a week, but really doing like one a month, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it every night before I go to bed, and I'm just gonna do it every single day.
Right.
And doing it daily will actually become easier than doing it weekly, because every day you eat cereal or drink a cup of coffee or whatever, it's just you do it every single day. As opposed to you might do something once a week, and if you forget about it that week, it's no big deal.
Right.
So 3.5 years ago, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it every single day, and we'll just see how long it lasts. And at last count, I have over 1,200 blog posts.
That's crazy. And it's just stuff that you interact with on a daily basis. Do they roll off easily, or do you have to think of them?
Most of them roll off easily.
Yeah.
80% go in there, sit down, 20 minutes, 25 minutes later, done.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's every night you do it? That's your routine?
Every night.
Every single night?
It's my last thing I do before I go to bed.
Interesting. The blog post that you got a lot of, it seemed like you got a lot of heat for was, maybe it wasn't a blog post, it was the Inc. It was Inc. or Fast Company?
Fast Company.
So the Fast Company article around, is it entrepreneurs in the Southeast or startups in the Southeast? Here's the environment that they work in. They don't necessarily raise money. They don't work, 20 hours a day. What was your thinking behind that, and what's kind of been the reaction? And I'd be curious to hear that.
Yeah, the work-life balance.
Yeah, the work-life balance.
Work-life balance and culture were heavy emphasis in the article.
Yeah.
So my point in the article was that entrepreneurs in the South have more work-life balance, have more focus on family and friends and things like that, and that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. The article talked about leaving work at 5:30 every day and going home to have dinner with the kids.
Yeah.
So the thing that it didn't say, which some people have to do or some people choose to do, is that you can be, working on the startup from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. every day, spend time with the kids from 5:30 p.m. or 6 p.m. when you get home till bedtime at 9 p.m. And then from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. you can still get a lot of stuff done.
Right.
We're not in the world where you have to be at the office to get stuff done.
Yep.
So depending on the stage of the startup, you can still balance time with kids and family, but you don't have to physically be in the office to do it.
Right.
So nowhere in the article did it say that you can only work 40 hours a week and be successful. Mm-hmm. It merely said you can leave every day at 5 p.m. and be successful.
Right. And so have you, do you actually view that as an advantage, being not in the bubble of, the Valley or New York, Boston, any other startup hub that exists? Do you find there being a benefit in today's day and age of starting a company outside of that bubble? You need to have resources, obviously. I think it'd be hard to find developers in certain parts of the country or the right talent. But is that an advantage or disadvantage being outside of that bubble?
For scrappy entrepreneurs going the bootstrap route or the capital light route, absolutely. Because when you're outside the bubble, the echo chamber of raise money, get big, that doesn't exist here. Mm-hmm. And so you can focus on what's most important, which is building a successful, sustainable business with a great corporate culture and a place that you want to go into work. And so in the Valley, there's so much around raising money and getting as big as fast as possible.
Yep.
That you can go try to raise money all day long in Atlanta, and it's very, very difficult to do so. And the culture around here is much more about being scrappy.
Yep.
By necessity. It's just the way it is.
It's a much more pragmatic.
Yeah,
which is healthy in a lot of instances. That's interesting. So another thing, one thing that you guys do that's Valley-like is to create a really neat kind of culture, corporate culture. What do you guys do? I know Pardot, you guys got voted like top workplace, right, in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Small is a small workplace. But what's your rationale behind that? Why do you do that? Is that for talent? What are the benefits of that?
So the idea generally, as a company, two very, very simple things. Be the best place to work and the best place to be a customer. And that's it. If we get those two things right, everything else in the business will take care of itself.
Right.
So we use that as a lens with which to make decisions, with which to recruit people, with which to determine what benefits to provide. And so being the best place to work as one of our stated corporate goals, at that point we want to do everything we can do to have free house cleaning for all employees, to have a masseuse on staff in the office, to catered breakfast and lunch and full health dental, 401k match, just everything we could do to be the best place to work, because that's one of our stated goals.
Right. So you guys get to the point where you said $7 million in revenue last year, and you're growing the company. So 6 months ago, Pardot, what's your thinking? We're going to run this thing forever. I'll do what I did with Hannon Hill, where I'll get it in the right hands, and eventually I'll just, maybe one of these other ones that I'm doing takes off, and I spend my time on that. What's kind of your personal thinking at that 6 months ago?
Yeah, 6 months ago, it was completely build a giant sustainable business. Just keep doing what we're doing. Everything's going great. The market's great. The people are great. The product's amazing. And so 6 months ago, it's just full steam ahead. Keep doing what we're doing. Having fun, being the best place to work, the best place to be a customer. Just full steam ahead.
But then how hard is it when that whole plan gets kind of rocked a little bit, or at least, someone says, we might be interested in kind of this. And you were very open on your blog about, all the emotions that you had over the course of being acquired.
Yeah, extremely emotional process.
So this is your baby, right? You've been, so 5 years you were working.
5.5 years, yeah. March of 2007 to October of 2012.
What was the initial call? Like you get a call, we're diving in. You said it was a someone in corporate development.
It's like, hey, we want to talk, and it's dog and pony show, do some demos. Yeah. Very casual.
What are you thinking at that point? What's going on? Did you know what was going on, or do you thinking, we'll see where this goes? I mean, we're not going to hold out hope.
Yeah, no anticipation. Yeah. The best point of leverage that we had come negotiation time was that everything was going great from a business point of view.
Right.
We had no timeline on the business, no investors that we had to answer to, and literally every aspect of the business was firing on all cylinders.
Right.
So the best leverage we had to keep saying no during any negotiation process is that the best alternative to any negotiated agreement would be just to keep doing what we were doing.
Right.
And we had no qualms doing that.
Right. And was this the first time you were kind of approached about an acquisition, or had you been approached before?
We'd been approached a few times before, yeah.
But it was easy to say no if
the other ones
make sense.
Yeah, we said no, and at some point they stopped.
Yeah. Interesting. So this one keeps going on, so you're thinking, all right, there's something to it. What are you thinking at this point? If the offer is right, if it makes sense for, was it you and Adam? Who ultimately made the call, or was it just you?
Adam and I, yeah, lots of back and forth. Lots of negotiating.
How hard was it to give up kind of your baby, let's just say? And is that how you viewed it? Did you view it as?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Crazy hard to give it up.
Yeah. How much back and forth was there? Was there a ton of negotiation?
A couple weeks of intense negotiations.
Yeah. Was it hard to just keep it quiet? I think you might have come by Scout Mob during that time, and you were cool, calm. Was it hard to just keep it kind of quiet and on the DL, I guess?
Very hard. It's like living a double life.
Yeah.
You got this giant thing going on.
Yeah.
But you can't talk about it with any friends. You can't talk about it with employees.
Yeah.
And especially with a publicly traded company, at that point it was insider information. It was a big enough deal that you couldn't talk about it. I couldn't talk about it with anybody.
Right.
So it was a really weird experience.
Yeah.
And stressful.
I'm sure. So as much as you can, what was the final, whether it was conversation, handshake, signature, what was that final interaction like? Where it was, all right, the deal is done.
Yeah, finally the offer got to the point where it became so compelling that it made sense to move forward with it.
Yeah.
After saying no many, many times.
Right.
Yeah. So it was weird.
Yeah. And then what was the time
Because
period?
it's much easier to say no, assuming you like what you're doing, than it is to say yes and know that the whole world's going to change dramatically in the course of 60 days, assuming everything goes through.
Right. What was the lag from that point, so it's done, to, all right, like the actual announcement?
For us, it was about 40 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy stressful 40 days.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks of negotiation. So really almost,
2 months.
Almost 2 months of just crazy anxiety.
Wow, that's crazy. And then when you announced it, what was that day like? Which I got an interesting story about that, but what was just that day like for you?
It was surreal. It was very much bittersweet.
Yeah.
Definitely some sadness. Like, chapter 1 of the book was done. It's time for chapter 2, and chapter 2 is going to be a great chapter, but chapter 1 was definitely finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was bittersweet.
Yeah. I just remember getting someone texted me about it, and I was, I look at my phone, I think I was doing a coffee meeting or something. I was like, holy cow, that is fantastic. That's amazing for the city and for you and all that, but it's just shocking news when you don't know that that's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's totally done at that point.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, hey, this is about to happen, or they're going to raise money and just keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
It was, the whole business has been purchased.
Yeah. So what will be your role going forward? How involved will you be? Or is there a period where you have to hang around for?
So I'm an advisor, just helping through the transition period.
Okay.
So I'm there to answer questions or do whatever, but beyond that, not too much.
And then how will the corporate culture that you created, how will that, how is that going to maintain? How, are you guys going to stay in the same space? How do the employees
same
feel?
space, add a bunch of new employees. And the culture will be a test of how well it was set up, and checks and balances and procedures, and, it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. I'm very optimistic.
Yeah.
Because the people there are so good and so bought into being a part of a strong culture that I'm confident that they want to maintain a strong culture.
Right.
But it's definitely going to be interesting being on the outside looking in.
Yeah. So I email you like midnight the night you guys announced, and maybe at that point things had died down, but I'm sure that day was crazy. I emailed you about doing this, and you responded like an hour later, and I had heard some other people had emailed you like late at night or Vash or whatever. So that must have been just, were you wired? Were you just up all night, or was is that your normal email?
That's not normal.
That's not normal. You couldn't sleep.
Normally I do reply quickly.
Yeah.
But I'm also really good at getting 8 hours of sleep every night, but not that night.
Yeah.
I was wired.
You said you're good at replying quickly. Everyone has their own trick. What's your email trick? Because everyone has a hard time with email.
So I don't write very much. I'm very short, simple, concise answers, and then focus on inbox 0.
Yeah.
So every night before I go to bed, I either reply to the email or I file it away to reply to it the next day, but the inbox is always empty.
Right. Well, so I got to ask what your plan is from here on out. I mean, now life-changing, obviously, just the acquisition and all that. I mean, what are you going to do from here? I mean, you just want to start more companies?
I do, yeah. Yeah. So first focus is helping with the transition at Pardot, making sure everything's taken care of, all the questions are answered, and everybody's in good hands, which I'm confident is going to be real smooth and easy. And then focus on helping the community, focus on investing in more startups, and then focus on being a part of other startups as well.
So you, in theory, now all the pressure's off, right? Like I mean, you don't have the pressure of this being your livelihood, these next upcoming startups. Will that change your mentality on like how you're going to approach them?
I don't think it'll change the mentality too much. I think there'll be a greater sense of urgency to move faster when working ideas become prevalent. Meaning, like, before, if we were working on something and it was looking pretty good, we would just keep doing what we're doing. But at some point in the Pardot experience, we knew it was going to be very successful. But at the time, we didn't have more money to put into it. Obviously, we tried to raise money. A little bit different going forward will be now if I'm involved in a startup and it's firing on all cylinders, there'll be more resources available to accelerate that and grow even faster. So that'll be fun too.
Yeah. The startup village idea, is that one of the projects you'll be working on, right?
That's a pie in the sky, doing some research on it, looking around.
Yeah.
Completely opportunistically and no timeline at all.
Yeah, just if it works, it works.
If it works, it works. If not, no big deal.
What's the general idea? Create a big physical space where startups can work, where there's mentors, where there's bigger startups, one-person startups.
Exactly. Just a central place for the community, much like you have an Olympic village for the Olympics, have a startup village for startups.
Okay, that's really cool. And what exist out there, like across the country?
There's a number of ones. It's not as readily defined as things like Y Combinator clones are, but there are a number of places out there, like General Assembly in New York, or there's a place in Chicago that's pretty well known.
Yeah.
So there's definitely ones out there.
Would the idea be to do some investment in the companies, or no, stay out of that completely?
Well, not completely. I mean, it would be opportunistic as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be a central gathering place for startups, both to work as well as to have events.
Yeah. Cool. That's it. That's all I got.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for the great questions.
Enjoyed it. Yeah. And it was. By the way, I didn't know a lot of your interesting, a lot of your early stories. Yeah. I asked you that question, like, did your early days? You had started a ton of stuff when you were a kid. That's awesome. I thought Hand and Hill. I figured most people probably started something, but you had Hand and Hill was like your 5th startup.
Yeah, I'd experimented with a lot of ideas.
Yeah. That's awesome. I really enjoyed it.